Hi everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and today we're talking about how there's no one single answer to recovery. There's no one way of going about it. There's no one kind of quote unquote magical answer or one prescribed way to reach recovery. And I think it's really important to remember that, because that's when we can get into comparing ourselves to others and thinking that if another person used a certain approach and we used that same approach and it's not working for us, then somehow we can get down on ourselves because of that. So it's very important, like we've been talking about, to really own your recovery and really take the time and put the energy into assessing and figuring out what works for you. And you don't have to know that going in. A lot of times it's a process. So sometimes it does mean ruling certain things out and experimenting. But you also don't want to take too much time experimenting, because recovery it can be very urgent and it can be very very time relevant. So you do want to find your way and you want to kind of sculpt what works for you, but you also, I think, want to be mindful of the amount of time you're giving yourself to do that. You don't want to let that linger. So I think that trying something is better than trying nothing. So even if you try that one thing and then you realize that it's not exactly for you, but it takes you one step closer to what is for you, then that's good. That's going forward. So definitely actively try. Don't just think about what may or may not work, but actively try things. And in the process, you will see what doesn't work. But the beauty of that is that when you get closer to seeing what does work, you will have been able to take things from what didn't work, because there may be elements of it that were good and that were positive. So it's kind of an art that way. You take bits and pieces of things that have helped. You've sort of, over time, if you focus on the positive, you kind of can filter out what didn't help and just retain what did. And with the stuff that does help, you might not even really be able to recognize in the moment that it's helping, but you might have those tools to use later and be happy that you learned them in the first place, even if you couldn't really utilize them in the moment. So try different things and realize that nothing that you're trying is a waste. So that's very important. And try things with an open mind. So don't kind of look at something as the one prescribed way to do recovery, and also don't look at something as a bad thing either. Don't not try something because you think that it won't work. So there are many different approaches. I mean, there's and it's important to have the support that you need to direct you, to maybe help you find some resources, to be some kind of a guide to you throughout the process. So the most important thing is that you're not doing it alone. So if you have a therapist or a mentor or some support system or just somebody to kind of guide you in the process of seeking out maybe more intensive treatment, if that's what you need, it's important to have at least one other person there kind of with you along the way, because when you're in an eating disorder, often you may not be able to judge what may or may not work, because it might not feel like it'll kind of be like the eating disorder is calling the shots and you're just kind of going along for the ride. And it may be that you think you're acting in your own best interest, but if the eating disorder is still largely at play, then it could be that the eating disorder mindset is manipulating your idea of what support really is. So, or what help really is, or what the best approach really is. So, if you can have somebody to kind of guide you, even if it's a friend or if it's a relative or somebody that can at least help point you in the right direction, or help you kind of weed out what your moments when you may not be thinking very clearly, that would be great. And so sometimes if you have the therapist may be all you need. You may not need more than seeing a therapist once or maybe twice a week, but then there's that therapist can help you if you need to get more support and be kind of a gateway to that. So, there are just so many possibilities. I mean, I'm sure that, you've heard them thrown around, but there are so many different ways to go about getting recovery or seeking out recovery, and they're not always the most traditional ways that we think of. But the first ones that come to mind are inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment. Outpatient treatment can cover so many things. It can mean support groups. It can mean like intensive outpatient treatment, like going a few times a week to for part of the day to a place. It can mean going outpatient to a place every day, but you don't spend the night, but you're there for a majority of the day and you have all your meals there. It can mean support, depending on what helps, what you identify with. There are also 12-step programs that may help. There are, there's therapy, there's nutritionists, dietitians. Dietitians, just make sure that when you're seeking out a dietitian that this person has a lot of experience with eating disorders, because they have to know that they're dealing with not just the nutritional aspect of things, but that there's a whole other emotional component to it as well. And then they have to be good at not thinking so much in black and white. That's really important when you're looking at it for a dietitian. You need, I think personally, what helped me was that my dietitian, my nutritionist, was very, she met me where I was at and then helped me from there. And then there was a point at which she realized that she couldn't help me anymore because I needed to go inpatient. But that was her approach, and I think that if it were like a black and white thing, it would have, it's just, they have to understand that it's not about, it's not really, this is not rooted in a physical problem, so they have to be kind of, I would think, more holistic about your treatment. It's also very important that no matter who you're working with and what capacity, oh, and of course there's also psychiatrist if medication is helpful for you too. So, and there's so many other things, there's so many things. Those are really like the most obvious ones that come to mind, but there are a lot of non-traditional things as well. But I think it's very important that no matter who you're working with, no matter what approach you realize is best for you, that the people who are guiding you in treatment, who are, your team, so to speak, that they have communication with each other. So it's important that everybody is kind of like on top of where you're at in your treatment, and if one part of your treatment is falling short, there always needs to kind of be a consistent balance, and the people in charge of your treatment need to be very clear-headed and very, very just all on the same page, and all just consistently aware of how you're doing, so that, at any point they could step in and readjust something. Yeah, and so, there are lots of, I guess, more subtle differences in how you might approach your treatment. For example, some people prefer seeing their weight when they have to gain weight, and some people prefer not seeing it. And depending on the place might have protocol as to whether you do or do not know your weight. And, you know, this is, again, you might really not want to know your weight, and if the place thinks that for some reason what their protocol is that you should know your weight, don't necessarily rule it out and see it as a bad thing. Some of these things are meant to empower you. Some of these things are meant to, often places who want you to know your weight, often they do it because they want to kind of recondition the eating disorder, or, you know, rewire that part of your brain that puts so much emphasis on weight. And I think it's like almost about desensitizing yourself to the importance of weight. So, you know, also, you know, facing your fears. It's like if one of the biggest fears you have is seeing your weight go up, then a place might they might purposefully want you to see your weight so that you're in the best possible place to deal with the fears that come up from that. So that's just one example. Many places won't show you your weights, and they have their own reasons for that. But don't assume that if, you know, you think it's best to not know your weight, that that maybe if you spoke to somebody at the treatment center and understood more about it and understood maybe more of the positive effects of it, that it you know, you may want to then just remain open to the positive effects of the kind of treatment that is available to you. It doesn't mean that you have to ultimately choose that, but try to remain open to it. Try to remain open to any of the positive effects, any of the positive components of treatments that may surface. Don't focus on the negative. I know that's really hard to say, but I was in treatment with a girl once who left after a day because she hated it there. And while often I've heard of that kind of a thing happening, and I've heard very legitimate stories and very understandable stories. But if it's about not quite yet knowing about a place, if it's about, you know, you're getting a really bad vibe on the first day, or you're just not feeling it, the first day for a lot of people is the most difficult day anyway. And I think it's very important to at least, if it's not a horrendous situation, if it's not something that is so blatantly awful that you feel that for your own safety you really have to leave, I think it's a good idea to stick it out and use that as an opportunity to explore like what's going on within me. And if it's something external, I still think you can use that as an opportunity to start to deal with feelings that come up, you know, start to deal with how to communicate, start to deal with feeling your feelings in an uncomfortable situation, when it's, as long as it's ultimately a safe environment. So that's just an example, you know, just about remaining open to things, really, really looking at what good can ultimately come out of something, even if you can't see it right then, even if you still have tunnel vision. It's just so beneficial in any kind of a treatment to, if you can't focus on the good at that point in time, it might be very early on and very overwhelming, at least try not to go out of your way to focus on the bad. And in doing so, you can remain more open to the benefits that might come in. So, or if you see something as bad, then try and remain open to the possibility that something really, really good for you could come of it. So, wow, I feel like I really hopped around in this video, but basically lots of options within the options. Keep some kind of support system to help weed through the ideas, and trust yourself and trust the people that are close to you, that are in a position to make decisions. Trust that sometimes you don't know the best answer, that it will reveal itself to you in time, and really, 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 really trust the process. Because if your goal is recovery, it's going to work. It will work because recovery is a state of mind. Okay, take care.